so often it's like you're thinking about what the next job is going to be. That's the other thing too. You keep calling it a job or a gig or things like this. And I mean, like, I certainly didn't come from a family where like somebody was going to like pay for me to have an apartment in New York, you know, or like whatever. I no means like came from a difficult or tough upbringing, you know, like I had everything I needed, but there was no like safety net in terms of doing film, following my dreams of doing film. So like I always saw it as like, oh, I'm gonna gig, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna like, you know, so I'm gonna do this, you know, corporate gig because it's gonna, you know, cover my rent for the month, or it's gonna do this or that, you know. And I think more and more through sort of doing different kinds of jobs and seeing other people, how they live their lives and how they operate things, like I realized like, oh, I can actually like now make a good enough living doing the things I really believe in more so, and not have it be such a financial decision, but be such a sort of like decision made out of like this kind of desperate idea, like, oh, I need to be working. I just need to be working. No matter what it is, I need to be working. I think it has to have a couple things going on. One, it has to be pushing me in a new direction artistically, and then two, I think it has to be advancing a mission or idea that I think is really important. And I think like where those two things are married is where it's perfect. Like that's like where it's like, oh, this is like when I first got into film, the intersection I wanted to be at was like I was always fascinated by where films were political, social, emotional. They had impact beyond themselves, but they also felt challenging and formally pushing the boundaries, you know. So I think that's like the intersection I'm constantly looking for. I think I always had a bit of a chip on my shoulder because, you know, I think a version of success as seen by my family was largely like, oh, you know, go find a permanent job somewhere, like take a gig somewhere where there's a brand name, a 401k, etc. Like that's super stable. And I think my level of risk tolerance was like I wanted to take more risk than that, but I also still had that mentality in my head. So I took the risk, but then it was always at this hedge of like, oh, but I have to make sure I'm taking a certain number of gigs a year that pay this much or do this. But what I started to realize is those gigs were allowing me to get the leverage to then take the gigs that were maybe not paying as well, but like meant more to me. And so then I saw it as sort of like a financing thing where it's like, okay, I'm gonna do this gig because then it's gonna help pay to do this documentary for a week. Now the documentaries have caught up, and now they are just the main gig for me. I guess I should like set it up, but like, so I, you know, I right now about to come out is a project called Unprecedented, where myself and the director Alex Holder had exclusive access to Donald Trump and his family from about mid-September 2020 to about June 2021. In that time, we interviewed former President Trump 3 times. We interviewed Ivanka Trump 3 times, twice while the family was in office. And we were at the January 6th insurrection, and that project came to me through a company that I largely do what I might not categorize, jobs I would not categorize as being at that intersection of meaningful and impactful, right? And if I had not put my whole effort into the jobs that maybe didn't quite align with that, at varying levels. Some of their projects absolutely, and others were like, okay, I'm gonna do this, but it's not gonna change my life, right? It's not gonna push a boundary in any way. But by putting my whole effort into all those jobs, I was the first person they thought of to recommend for this job that absolutely is at that intersection. Like it's almost like too perfectly at that intersection, right? You're there, you're present, you're giving a little bit of yourself. Like if you've said yes to doing that, then that's how you should handle it. It's like, yes, I'm here, I said yes. So now I'm gonna take this as seriously as any other job I would do, despite me maybe not thinking it's at that intersection. And then through that, I got a job that absolutely is. So like, it was totally worth it in retrospect. But even if that hadn't come along, I still think it's worth it. And I find, especially when you're working with other people, that energy you put out is just like it's just so essential to their creativity, their willingness to go to bat for you. You know, it's like, it's hard to put out it's very hard if you're putting out negative energy constantly, right? And you are constantly sort of on the clock and grumpy about everything, you know, and just counting the minutes till the end. And then when you do need to push because you're running late or something happened in the location or started raining and now we're pressed for time, you need to push that crew to go further. Is the crew you've been sort of negative with, had like negative energy, really going to give you positive energy back when you're asking them to kind of dig in and do something for you. Of course they're not going to do that. Like if you've been open, given them proper breaks, given them space to be themselves and be creative, then when you really need to kind of go forward as a team, you're going to be more cohesive that way because they feel bought in to the process. And I feel like that's a huge thing, is like feeling like good energy makes people feel buy-in to both you and them, right? And so then you're in it together. So like, yeah, when you do a good job for a particular job, it's like, oh no, that guy was in it with us, right? And so therefore, like, that energy is sort of this cycle. You give it to them, they give it to you, and it's just going to keep going. And you kill the cycle when you think it's either like a one-way interaction there, that like what you put out isn't going to come back on you. Because I think a lot of people see that as like this well that you can keep drawing from, and it's not that at all. It's much more cyclical than that. Being present and being aware and seeing everything as much as you can, hearing everything. I think like it's kind of helpful to use examples. Like we were at our first event, which was with Eric Trump, and we were in Pahrump, Nevada. And, Alex had a very narrow focus on sort of at the time of like, we're going to cover the rally, we're going to cover the speech, we have exclusive access, whatever. You can get some shots of people milling in, but, sort of they're the focus, But I'm like, whatever, I'm here, I have the camera. So I just start filming around, and there's a scene in which a woman is handing out, I think it's important to note out, a white woman is handing out signs that all have different sort of Trump supporter information on them, like women for Trump, Asian Americans for Trump, Black voices for Trump. And a Black woman approaches this woman who's handing out signs and says, oh, I'd like a women for Trump sign. And this woman says, oh, well, wouldn't you prefer a Black voices for Trump sign? And then there's this uncomfortable exchange where the woman who asked for the sign was like, well, I am a Black voice for Trump, and the woman was like, so then take that sign, and basically like forces that sign on her, right? And in that moment, like, that was me, like, sort of fully feeling my responsibility. Like, oh, no. Like, that moment says something about the supporters, their interactions, the Trump movement, et cetera, and in this little microcosm. And I have to always be looking for those little microcosms. I mean, like, our joint mentor, Marco Williams used to always say, the universal is found in the specific. And it's like always looking for that specific. So I think that's like first and foremost where I always see my responsibility is, where can I find the specific moment that speaks to the larger truth? Because that is what film is small moments, or big moments, but moments isolated that sort of through an ineffable quality of film can engender feelings and emotions and reactions that hopefully will change people's minds or perspectives, or at least give them a beat to maybe reconsider things. You're always missing something. I mean, even if you're the best shooter in the world, you're always missing something, and so you're trying to not just like reduce what you're missing. That's like sort of the old way of thinking, I think, in a lot of ways. It's honing in on what you are getting and how it's important to what you're getting, right? One of the things, I was filming something the other day where we're chasing storms, right, and doing storm chaser. And the director says something really good, which is like, yeah, we're chasing storms. It's good to get the storms, but we want to focus on this chaser, on the photographer, right? This is her story that we're telling. So that alone is a focus that's different from if I went in there, I could totally cover it and just show storms and her, a little in the foreground or whatever. But no, like it's as important in that moment, even though there's an incredible big storm, that life-changing image going on over there. We got that, but then also getting the life-changing moment that's happening with a person internally, So like I think that you have to, be aware of what the bigger truth you're trying to tell is, and then be looking for those moments. So I think it's like constantly telling yourself you're missing something, and then this more broader sense of like, okay, but of what I am able to capture, what is sort of key to the story, and then also like leaving your mind open for things that are totally unexpected and don't jive with what you were thinking, because like that clash is also important too. And I think that's like the great difference between documentary and spot journalism. I won't give like long form journalism, I won't throw that under the bus, but I think like spot journalism is very much like, okay, there's this story, I'm coming in, I gotta get this quote, I gotta talk to this person, I'll get the quote from the police department, I'll get the quote from this person, bystander, okay, we have our story. Whereas like the beautiful thing about documentary is you're there for 3 months before you really know what your story is. Like, you really know what the subtext is, the tone, the themes of it are. And then you start to really find things that fit in with those themes you're observing. And then everything kind of clicks into place from there, you know? Much like the documentary process, which is about like meaning will present itself to you as you go through the process. Like, I think I see like my career very much in that way as well, that as I go through and I put things out in the universe and I take risks and sort of will make compromises for things that I believe in versus I'll make no compromises for things that I don't, right? Has brought about projects and things that do have meaning. And so the meaning has found me by way of me sort of chipping away at it. You know, there's people I've worked for, I'm gonna leave it vague on purpose, but there's people I've worked for who I think 5 years ago I would have been like, I would have done anything to work with. And then I work with them and they're great people. And they're really talented, and I'm amazed by their level of skill. But I'm like, oh, that's not what I want to be doing with this medium. And as important as this project is, or how cool or well-funded or famous the person is or whatever, it's like, oh, this doesn't fit right. But then other things, they absolutely feel that way. And so then when it feels that way, you like run at it. And you're just like, okay, now this person gets that 100%. This person is going to be where I go right in, I slot in. And I think the advice is tough because that's sort of hard to say. I think it's individual to the person. But I think the key is find people you can work with who not only fit your vibe, right, would be a simple way of putting it, but who are on the same page as you. The fewer conversations you have to have because like, you know, you are in sync, the better the work is going to be almost every time because you are sort of on the same page, and then the conversations you have can be more advanced because you're past the first principles of like how to do this thing, what your ethics are, right? What your morals. That's a huge one with documentary. I see people who like just burn through contributors, participants in their documentaries, and just like get the most intense moment immediately. Not the way I want to work. Yeah, I want to go back 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times with someone. Meet the family without the camera. Hang out with them. Have dinner. Get to know them as people before we start sticking a camera in their face. Very personal thing, you know? And so when you find people like that, just keep doing things that way, like it's so much better. Then the people are like, maybe rub you the wrong way. They go rushing in. They always want to get it and go. You know, maybe you just hold off on that, you know, maybe you just like don't work with them as much, you know, but I think you can learn something from every job. So I don't want to discourage people from pushing their boundaries, but that's kind of where I've kind of found that like push and pull.